If you're wondering about the best way to tackle all the graphs, all the Venn diagrams, all the syllogisms in the decision-making subtest of the UCAT, this is the video for you. Hi guys, my name is Emil and I'm a first year medical student at Monash University, and I recently graduated from Scotch College in 2020 with an ATAR of 99.8 and a 99th Percentile UCAT. In this video, I'm going to be presenting my tips and tricks for the decision-making subtest, which was actually the subtest that I scored the highest on, and it was a subtest I aced on test day. I'm hoping to share with you the strategies that I use to answer each of the questions, how I approach the subtest in general, and the tips that I found helped me a lot to do well in the subtest. This video will be separated into three main parts. Firstly, an overview of what the decision-making subtest entails and what they ask of you. Secondly, my general tips and strategies for the decision-making subtest as a whole. And then thirdly, some footage of me answering each of the 6 question types in the decision-making subtest. If you find these UCAT guide videos helpful, please do leave a like, comment, or subscribe, as it helps the channel a lot and it will help me to make more of these videos in the future. Moving on to the first part of this video, I'll be providing an overview of what the decision-making subtest actually requires you to do and what the time constraints are like in this subtest. The first thing you should know is that the decision-making subtest asks you to answer 29 questions in a total of 31 minutes. This gives you about 64 seconds to answer each question in the decision-making subtest. And this also means that the decision-making subtest is one of the least time-pressured subtests in the UCAT, although it doesn't really feel that way. Another thing you should note is that these 29 questions actually amass to a total of 36 marks in the decision-making subtest. So this means that you have about 54 seconds for each mark in this subtest, which honestly is a lot better than some of the other subtests you have. The other thing that is different about the decision-making subtest is that there are actually 6 question types. So these are syllogisms, logical reasoning, interpreting data questions, Venn diagrams, mathematical reasoning, and strongest argument questions. Now these questions all have a great variety in the ways you tackle them, so that actually gives the decision-making subtest quite a bit of difference compared to the other subtests, which often only have a few question types. As a whole, the decision-making subtest asks you to apply your reasoning skills. As obvious as that sounds, I'd really best describe the decision-making subtest as a sort of mix between verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning. You are expected to apply sort of mathematical principles, but you also need to be very good at reading questions and stimuluses and being able to take the largest amount of data you can from them accurately. Because of that, to succeed in decision making, you really do have to be good at making mathematical deductions as well as making deductions from a stimulus by reading it. Now that you have a general idea of what the decision making subtest entails, let's move on to my general tips and strategies for the decision making subtest as a whole. Now the first tip I have to give about the decision making subtest as a whole is that you really need to be careful in understanding the data when you are given it. What this means is that the decision-making subtest isn't really like verbal reasoning where you have to skim data. You usually have a much lower amount of words in the stimulus. So this means that you can actually read it fully before you answer questions, or you have sort of diagrams that can be complicated, but they're also very readable in the time frame that you have. This means that when you read any form of data stimulus that you're given in decision-making, you have to make sure to read it very carefully and view it very carefully to make sure that you understand and get as much information out of that data as you can. I found that understanding the data and decision making very quickly actually helps you to save a lot of time, because it means that when you go to the questions, you don't have to return from the question to the stimulus again and again. And this means that you can save a lot of time that would otherwise have been wasted. As you guys know, time is an essential commodity in the UCAT, so any extra time you can get from answering a question quicker will pay dividends in the long end. The second tip I have to give you guys for the decision-making subtest as a whole is that you must remove the emotion from your thinking when you're doing decision-making questions. Now this is actually very similar to some of the advice I've given in the past in my verbal reasoning guide. What's important is that you approach each stimulus at face value and you don't try to assume anything about the stimulus or from the question stem, regardless of how ridiculous it might seem. I'll delve into this further when I'm doing questions from each question type, but I still think it's very important to know this for the subtest as a whole. Now the third tip I have for you guys is that you should use the noteboard as much as possible as you can in decision making. Unlike verbal reasoning, the decision making subtest is one where you can actually write a lot of the information down because you actually have a lot more time to be processing the information you get given. What this means is that you actually have a golden opportunity to write notes and write things in your noteboard. And this helps a lot with having an understanding of the information as well as in answering questions that might be presented to you. I'll show you how I use the noteboard a little bit more in the later part of this video, where I do individual questions from each question type. But in general, the noteboard helps so much with doing logic puzzles, probability questions, and really all the questions that are available in the Decision Making Subtest. That wraps up my general tips for the Decision Making Subtest as a whole. I actually don't have that many tips because I feel like the subtest does change quite a bit depending on what question type you're doing, but also I feel as though the underlying principles behind those 3 tips will help you do very well on the subtest. So without further ado, let's get on to the third part of this video, which will be me showing you the strategies that I use for each of the 6 question types in the Decision Making Subtest. So as usual, I've pulled up a practice Decision Making Subtest from the UCAT Consortium official website. And with this, I'll be able to show you guys the ways I answer each of the 6 question types in the Decision Making Subtest. So straight away, we have this question type, which is called a syllogism. And syllogisms usually make you do a lot of sort of mental gymnastics and making you try to best understand this stimulus that they provide here. And then you have to drag and drop yes and no for each of 5 questions. So this question type is in general very time consuming, so it takes a lot longer to do these questions than it does some of the other questions in the Decision Making Subtest. And also these questions are worth 2 marks each. So if you get all 5 correct, you get the full 2 marks. If you get 1 wrong, you get 1 mark. And if you get 2 wrong, you get 0 marks. So because of that, it's really important that you want to get all 5 correct, because just getting one of these yes or no's wrong will mean that you lose 50% of the marks for this question. So reading the stimulus, employees are promoted on the strength of their performance rating. A company rates all its employees between 1 and 4 for their bonus allocation. 1 is the highest, 4 is the lowest. Employees are only eligible for promotion after 3 years of service in the same position. All employees and those eligible for promotion must get a rating of 1 or 2 for a bonus payment. Okay, so reading this statement, Diana got a rating of 4 this year, so she will not receive a bonus payment. This would be correct because the stimulus says all employees and those eligible for promotion must get a rating of 1 or 2 for bonus payment, so this is yes. Brian was promoted 3 years ago, so it's definite that he will be promoted this year. This would be no, because this stimulus says only eligible, so it doesn't mean that he'll definitely get promoted. Roger was promoted 5 years ago. He received a bonus this year. He did not get a 3 rating this year. This would be yes, because he received a bonus, which means he would have gotten a 1 or 2 rating. Salim got a promotion after working for 2 years, so he cannot be working for the company. Yes, that's true, because this is only eligible for promotion after 3 years. And then the number of employees at the company. So there's no, without even finishing to read this, there's no information about the number, so we can't assume anything, so this would be no. So that's how, in general, I'd approach these syllogism questions. It's important to just be reading the stimulus very carefully and making sure you don't make any assumptions when trying to do this question type. So now we'll move on to the second question type, which will be these logic puzzles. So this is a logic puzzle, and this question type often requires you to do some working out. So this is something that I definitely use the noteboard a lot for. So what I would do is I would definitely write some working out on a piece of paper for this question. So I'm reading Clark, Sam, Drake, Rosie, and Mary have 1 car each. The cars are either red, blue, or green in color. 3 cars are hatchbacks and the rest are sedans. All the sedans are green. Hatchbacks are either blue or red. Mary and Clark do not have hatchbacks. Amongst Sam, Drake, and Rosie, only Drake has a blue car. So from these statements, it tells me quite a lot already straight away about the information that's been given. So straight away from this one, Mary and Clark do not have hatchbacks, and we know that 3 cars are hatchbacks and the rest are sedans. And we also know that there are 5 people. I know straight away that Mary and Clark are the only people with sedans. So I'm writing each of the names, the initials. And I know that Clark and Mary have sedans and the rest of them have hatchbacks. And now I also know that all the sedans are green. So Clark has a green sedan and Mary has a green sedan. And then I also know that amongst Sam, Drake and Rosie, only Drake has a blue car. And these 3 all have hatchbacks. So we know that, we know that looking at these answer options, we know that Rosie does not have a sedan, so A is not true. We know that there is only 1 blue car because only Drake has a blue car. We know that there can't be 3 red cars, so it must be D. Sam has a red hatchback. And I'll try to show my sheet here. I'm not sure if you can see that. And that's the sort of working out I'm doing with my noteboard during this subtest. So now we'll move on to the next question type, which would be this one here, which is strongest argument questions. And with strongest argument questions, it's very important to be reading the stimulus. So this is, should the legal voting age be reduced to 16 to overcome the issue of poor voter turnout? So strongest argument questions are often a bit ambiguous. They might be a bit hard for you to think about, but really what the question is asking is which argument from these 4 answer options best addresses the question posed in the stimulus. So reading this, let's see, for A, yes, if under 18s can vote, politicians will listen to them and consider the issues that affect their lives. So we'd actually say that this is not the strongest argument because it does not address this main point of the question, which is the issue of poor voter turnout. And with B as well, yes, giving under 16-year-olds the vote will increase the number of people eligible to vote. So this is a bit closer, but it doesn't really address the issue of poor voter turnout. It just changes the number of people eligible to vote. And then with C, no, 16-year-olds are not engaged enough to make a considered political judgment. This has nothing to do with this question, so this would not be the strongest argument as well. And then finally D, no, it cannot be guaranteed that making more people eligible to vote will increase voter turnout. And so this, you can see, actually addresses this this question stem a lot better than all of the other options. So this would be the correct answer, because especially since it addresses directly this issue of poor voter turnout, which is introduced in the question stem, and it addresses that directly. So that's how you sort of approach these strongest argument questions. You have to make sure that the answer option that you're picking actually directly addresses the question that's being asked in the stem. Now, the next question type we'll see is this one, which is interpreting graphs and data questions. So these questions are also similar to the syllogisms that we've seen before, in that there are 5 statements that you have to drag and drop yes and no to, and these ones are also worth 2 marks each. So as you can see, these ones actually are also a bit time consuming to do, because technically there are 5 questions to answer for each of these questions. But that being said, it is easier once you break down the stimulus and you see what's being offered and what's being required of you. So brewed coffee contains caffeine, volatile substances, and organic acids. Volatile substances lend a distinct aromatic flavor to coffee. Organic acids lend a bitter taste to coffee. And then we have this graph here with a key. So this is caffeine, volatile substances, and organic acid, and the amount of component extracted in water as well. Okay. So we have this first statement: coffee brew extracted at 4 minutes is the least flavorful. This is telling us that this is about volatile substances. So coffee brew extracted at 4 minutes is the least flavorful. This would be false because there are volatile substances being extracted at 4 minutes. Among the 3 components, caffeine is the quickest to dissolve in water. This would be true because it's the first thing that is extracted and it happens very quickly. Someone who prefers bitter coffee should brew it for at least 7 minutes. So this is about the organic acids. And yes, that is true because organic acids increase a lot after 7 minutes. For a perfectly aromatic cup of coffee, the powder should be ground finely. There is no information about powder here in the stimulus, so this would be no. The higher the temperature of the water, the more bitter the taste of the coffee. Also no information about the temperature of the water, so this is also no. So as you can see, a lot of these questions in the decision-making subtest really require you to just not make any assumptions and also to just make the most out of the information that is given to you. Now the next question type we'll see in decision making are these Venn diagram questions. And so looking at these Venn diagram questions can be very confronting because they look extremely confusing. But what I recommend for these Venn diagram questions is to start by focusing on one part. So it says, based on the diagram, how many jewelry pieces have gold, diamond, and silver, but not platinum or pearl? So what I'll do first is just focus on the gold part. So I'll be looking at this gold arrow right here. And then what I'm going to look at now, I'm going to look at diamond. So that's the rectangle. So that's this part of intersect. So that includes 18, 75, 23, and 17. So now I'm only looking at 4 numbers. And now silver as well. That's the heart. So now I'm looking at 2 numbers, 75 and 23. And then, but not platinum or pearl. That's platinum is the pentagon. So that includes 23. So it's not 23. That's just 75. So as you can see, like, even though it looks very confronting to look at in the first place, once you break it down, it isn't too bad actually to get the information you need out of a Venn diagram just by sort of focusing on one part at a time and then moving on and adding on parts. Now the final question type we have is this one here, which is a mathematical reasoning sort of question. And there is a lot of variety with these questions here, but these are also quite easy to tackle once you get the hang of it. So with this one, there are the 27 people in a club are either adults or children. There are 3 more males and females. 12 of the 16 adults are male. So 3 more males and females. If the number of females, let's say the number of females was X, then the number of males would be X plus 3. So then we know that 2X plus 3 equals 27. And that would give us that X, the number of females, equals 12. So then we know that there are 12 females and there are 15 males at the club. And then we're told that 12 of the 16 adults are male, and there are either adults or children. So then 15 minus 12 equals 3, which will give you this answer. So as you can see, a lot of the questions in the decision-making subtest aren't too bad when you think about it. And especially considering that for this question, you'd actually have about 60 seconds to do, but that definitely did not take us 60 seconds to do just then. So what's good about the decision-making subtest is that in general, you can actually spend a lot more time on the syllogisms and the drag and drop yes or no questions compared to these mathematical and strongest argument questions. And that means that the decision-making subtest actually becomes a lot less time pressured compared to some of the other subtests in the UCAT. And what this means also is that you can really try your best to sort of master these questions by doing a lot of them, and then you'll undoubtedly get much better at this subtest over time. So now that we've done the 6 question types, let's just quickly skip to the end and check the answers to see that whether we got all of these right. And yep, we attempted 6 questions from each of the 6 question types and we got all of them correct. So that's great. And now we'll move on to a conclusion to this video. Hopefully you found me answering those 6 question types on the UCAT decision-making subtest helpful, and hopefully you have a better idea of how you might want to be answering those questions and the strategies you might want to be using for those questions in your own UCAT practice. If you found this video helpful, or if you enjoy this type of content, please do leave a like and subscribe for more.